This is a discussion of reading 12, Human Character as a Vital Lie. It's an excerpt from Becker's book, The Denial of Death. As you can see, I had you read chapter 1, and then your reading skipped all the way to chapter 4. And what I'll do is what I do in class, although this will be a lot shorter than what we usually have time for in class. So you'll want to have your reading with you. I hope you've carefully done your reading. I hope you're carefully screening these videos on Becker. I can't emphasize how important his work is. I should say I can't overemphasize how important his work is. Okay, refer to your reading. Since we have some background on Becker, I will read the passage and comment on them. We're at the bottom of page 4, the paragraph at the bottom of page 4. The fact that this is what society is and has always been, a symbolic action system, a structure of statuses and roles, customs and rules for behavior designed to serve as a vehicle for earthly heroism. Each script is somewhat unique. Each culture has a different hero system. What the anthropologists call cultural relativity is thus really the relativity of hero systems around the world. And continue reading the rest of that paragraph, but what's he talking about here? Well, what does being heroic means? Well, it means standing up in the face of some challenge, right? Well, what is the challenge that we're standing up to here? Namely nature, or another term to refer to the biological aspect of nature, anality. So nature and anality, those are the challenges, but culture allows us, quote unquote, to be heroes, right? It allows us to stand up and face the challenges of nature and anality. That's how you understand that passage, okay? And then on page 7, under conclusion, fourth line, society itself is a codified hero system, I've just explained that, which means that society everywhere is a living myth of the significance of human life, a defiant creation of meaning. Well, I addressed living myth in the last video. It's a defiant creation of meaning, right? Because once again, we're standing up against nature and anality and trying to defy it. And that's what he's referring to there. Okay, in part 1 of the book, and chapter 4, Human Character as a Vital Lie. Refer to page 50, the bottom paragraph. But nature has, now here he's contrasting the purely animal nature with human nature. Animals are animals, but they're not aware of that, right? They don't have a consciousness of their independence from everything else. But humans, we're animals who are aware that we're animals. In fact, that's what he calls the existential paradox of the human conditions, Animals who are aware of their animal nature. That's only true of humans, not of the rest of the animal kingdom. So keep that in mind as you read this passage. Bottom paragraph, page 50. But nature has protected the lower animal by endowing them with instincts. An instinct is a programmed perception that calls into play a programmed reaction. It's very simple. Animals are not moved by what they cannot react to. They live in a tiny world, a sliver of reality, one neurochemical program that keeps them walking behind their nose and shuts out everything else. Okay, so animals, in other words, have no consciousness of their independence of everything else around them. They're just part of everything else. But now, look at man, to continue the reading. The impossible creature. Here nature seems to have thrown caution to the winds along with the programmed instincts. She created an animal who has no defense against full perception of the external world, an animal completely open to experience. not only in front of his nose, in his Umwelt, but in many other Umwelten, that's like worldview and worldviews. He can relate not only to animals in his own species, but in some ways to all other species. He can contemplate not only what is edible for him, but everything that grows. He not only lives in this moment, but expands his inner self to yesterday, his curiosity to centuries ago, his fears to 5 billion years from now, when the sun will cool, his hopes to an eternity from now. He lives not only on a tiny territory, nor even on an entire planet, but in a galaxy, in a universe, and in dimensions beyond visible universes. It's appalling, the burden that man bears, the experiential burden. And that really highlights the existential paradox of the human condition, as I said a while ago. The fact that we are animals who know that we are animals. So we have an acute fear of finality. We have an acute fear of death, of an acute fear of what tomorrow might bring. All these things are absent from animal consciousness. Page 56, an important quote on page 56. It's near the bottom. I want you to underline it. It is fateful and ironic how the lie we need in order to live dooms us to a life that is never really ours. Well, you should be able to interpret that comment by now, given our discussion of Becker. And so first of all, take it apart analytically. If you're ever asked to interpret a statement, well, take it apart piece by piece. The lie we need in order to live. Well, that's culture, right? We need culture in order to function comfortably in this very frightening world, right? In order to stand up to the challenge of nature and anality, we need culture to help us do that. So that's the lie we need in order to live. But accepting culture, quote, dooms us to a life that is never really ours, right? It's not our culture as individuals. We didn't invent it. We just simply inherited it. In fact, chances are we made no contribution to it whatsoever. We just simply accepted it by virtue of our birth. So it's not a life that we created for ourselves. It's the opposite of individualism, right? Culture is what's pretty much taken over. So that lie we need in order to live, culture, dooms us to a life that is never really ours. So we're not truly individuals. We are cultural beings, and thus we're living lives that are not really ours. Page 59. Drop down, it's about halfway down the page on page 59. The sentence starts, what would the average man do? I'll give you a second to find it. What would the average man do with a full consciousness of absurdity? He has fashioned his character for the precise purpose of putting it between himself and the facts of life. Once again, we don't deal honestly and ingenuously with nature and anality. We hide from them. It is a special tour de force that allows him to ignore incongruities, to nourish himself on impossibilities, to thrive on blindness. So, interpretation, no matter how suspicious we are regarding the truths of our culture, and no matter how weak maybe some of the cultural fantasies actually are, we still buy into them because it's the only game in town. To continue, he accomplishes thereby a particularly human victory, the ability to be smug about terror. Sartre has called man a useless passion because he is so hopelessly bungled, so deluded about his true condition. He wants to be a god with only the equipment of an animal, so he thrives on fantasies. As Ortega so well put it in the epigraph we have used for this chapter, man uses his ideas for the defense of his existence to frighten away reality. This is a serious game, the defense of one's existence. How take it away from people and leave them joyous? So I was thinking about something as I was reading that. We are stuck in this sort of predicament where we like to think of ourselves as maybe not gods, but certainly God-like, right? I mean, after all, even our scriptures tell us we're made in the image of God. But yet we come face to face with nature and anality almost daily. And that's the struggle. Page 60, a nice summary comment. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 7 lines from the top of the page, 60. It can't be overstressed one final time that to see the world as it really is devastating and terrifying. It achieves the very result that the child has painfully built his character over the years in order to avoid. It makes routine, automatic, secure, self-confident activity impossible. It makes thoughtless living in the world of men an impossibility. It places a trembling animal at the mercy of the entire cosmos and the problem of the meaning of it. In other words, culture is almost a necessary component of human life. Without it, we're rudderless, right? Without it, many of us feel we have no meaning, no purpose, and no defense against the challenge of nature and anality. And finally, the last page of the reading, page 66. We're going to read through some passages here, and I'm going to comment on them. Page 66, under the block quote. The irony of man's condition is that the deepest need is to be free of the anxiety of death and annihilation, but it is life itself which awakens it, and so we must shrink from being fully alive. So to be fully alive means you're living fully in the natural world. But that's what awakens our anxiety. That's what awakens anality. So we pull back. That's what he means. We shrink back from being fully alive. We fall back to what? We fall back to our culture.